I'm English, so only in English. I'm sorry. I'll keep it simple. Engineering is very important.
Oh yes, definitely.
Engineering and engineering heritage of railways is really important. It's very important to lots of people like me who like to understand engineering and who like to go to preserved railways, heritage railways in Britain. There I am having a glass of beer, a steam engine at my local heritage railway. What could be better than a glass of beer and a steam train? Perhaps a glass of port and a steam train. Here we are in a place that has been very well known to a very enthusiastic group of English railway enthusiasts. They have come to the Douro Valley, they've come to Portugal to photograph the railway trains as they were. They used to come here at a time when it was not easy to travel around Europe and to travel around Portugal. They came here specifically to take photographs, such as this engine coming up just outside where we are here. That photographed by Alan Orchard in 1968. They are very, very enthusiastic people who come here to see the trains, to see the landscape, to see the fabulous place that this is, and the way that those trains fit into this landscape. And it means a very great deal to those people. Where we were at lunch, on the wall, there's a little brass plaque, just up there, to Graham Gunnell, who was one of the enthusiasts who used to come here. He used to bring groups of enthusiasts here to tour to see the place, to see the railway heritage of Portugal. Last year, his group of enthusiasts came here to hold a memorial lunch for him at Calçocourta, where we were at lunchtime. It meant that much to both Graham and to his friends and supporters. Now, railways have a very long history in England, going back to the 1830s, and we also have a very long history of railway preservation. The first railway to be preserved in enthusiast ownership, amateur ownership, was the Talyllyn narrow gauge railway in Wales. In 1951, that became the world's first preserved heritage railway. It now has about 85,000 visitors a year who go to a very remote part of Wales to ride on trains. The British railway network was cut back very radically in the 1960s by Dr. Beeching and reduced massively. That meant that there were loads of places left in England and Britain as a whole with railways that were no longer required by the National Railway Network. They'd been closed down, but there were lines there were routeways there were engines, and there were rolling stock. And so enthusiast groups of amateurs started to build heritage railways out of the remains of what had been discarded by the National Railway Network. We now have over 150 preserved railways in Britain. We also have about another 120 motor museums and other transport museums. We like transport. There has recently been a government study into this, an all-party parliamentary group, and they've decided that heritage railways, just the railways themselves, are worth £250 million every year to the UK economy. If you include into that all the touristic activity as well, hotel nights, meals and so on, it comes out at somewhere over £600 million a year on old steam trains. It's big business. The government have decided also that there is scope for running passenger rail services on heritage railway lines. So lines that were once closed by the National Railway Network and reopened by amateurs as heritage railways are now being proposed as being the solution to urban transport and to rural transport systems for the National Railway Network. Very strange, a complete circle. And heritage railways are well used. They are well used by lots of people. The 30 largest heritage railways in Britain between 2009 and 2010 carried some 4.5 million passengers. Most of them were set up by amateurs, people with no expertise whatsoever. The Great Western Society at Didcot. It was established by 4 16-year-old schoolboys who decided that they didn't like the national approach to preserving railway locomotives because they weren't going to preserve their favourite locomotive. So they wrote a letter to a magazine and said, "We are thinking of buying a particular type of locomotive. Would you like to join in?" And they did. One letter, 4 16-year-old schoolboys. No money, but they did it. And they've now established what has become one of the larger operations, the Didcot Railway Centre, Great Western Railway, with a massive collection of locomotives, receives thousands of visitors every year. And that was by no means the only one. The Bluebell Railway in Sussex, set up in 1959 by these gentlemen. They're now very old, but they were not at the time. And they've established this railway, which has a very fine collection of locomotives, all volunteer run, runs just between Sheffield Park and East Grinstead in Sussex. And they have visits by other railway preservation societies, including this one, which is the Tornado, an A1 Pacific, a brand new locomotive built in 2008, from scratch, designed to run heritage railway tours on the mainline network of British Railways. There are hundreds of those run every year. Each of these railways operates a range of businesses that they involve themselves in. On the Bluebell Railway, you can have a wedding. It's £4,750. Okay, what's that? €5,500? Mm-hmm. You can go for dinner on board the train at £46 per head, including the ticket. You can have afternoon tea, £39 per person per journey. You can go and visit the locomotives sitting in the workshops and the sheds, and because you can get access to the mainline railway network, these locomotives such as Tornado can bring large numbers of people in one go. Another railway, Swanage Railway, down in Dorset. That one I like because that particular electric train I used to work when I was about 18 years old. My first job on the railways. I spent 5 years working for British Rail, and some of the rolling stock that I used to work is now on preserved railways. That's one of them. They have steam engines. They run them through the Dorset countryside. It's fabulous. They have diesel cars that they operate, and they are going to operate this particular diesel car as a standard piece of public transportation. They have other locomotives. This one I like over on this side, this diesel here. That's another one that I used to work on. So that's there, and one can go for rides on there. It's a fantastic place. That's a shunting engine I used to work on. Really good to see all these. And they do weddings and things like that as well. And basically all the things you would do with a railway. You feed people, you give them drinks, you sell them things. You bring them in and involve them in the business of railways. There are some other types of railways in Britain that are also heritage lines. There's this one, the Volks Railway in Brighton. It was built as a heritage railway. It was built as a tourist attraction over 100 years ago. It is still running as a tourist attraction. It's run every day, apart from during the First World War and the Second World War. There's another one, this one, the Downpatrick Railway in Northern Ireland. Again, run by amateurs. They've got a small group of about 200 people who are members. They have ex-Irish Railways diesel locomotives and a small network of lines which just runs over about a mile and a half, no more than that. But they have a railway triangle in the middle of it, which means they can do lots of manoeuvres with the trains, going up, going back, and visitors can stand and watch. They can take the trains, they can travel on them, and there's always something going on. They've got engine sheds, they've got reconstructions of rebuilding of things. Not all of their exhibits are shiny and nice, but people like to see things in their raw, real state. People will travel lots of miles to go and visit those. I travelled several hundred miles from my home with my family, and they let me go and do these things and see railways. Here's another one, the Romney Hythe and Dymchurch. It runs from a nuclear power station at one end of its line to a little seaside resort at the other, on the Sussex coast. It's got fabulous locomotives. It was built as a heritage, it was built as a tourist line by Captain Howie and Captain Louis Zabrowski. It is fabulous, but it's small scale, it's 1/3 scale, so that it's very cheap to operate. It has all the attributes of a proper railway, apart from the size. And there's Cheryl, my wife, riding on the train. It's used as public transportation. It's used to carry school children to school. So it's a tourist line and a public service. It was built as a tourist line. It always runs with steam engines. Where I live on the Isle of Wight, off the south coast of England, we used to have a very extensive railway network running around the island with lots of trains like that. The Isle of Wight is a tourist attraction in itself. Its main business is tourists. We receive millions of tourists every year. And they come to ride around on the island, to visit various places and do things. And one of the main things that they do is that they ride on our railways, or the bits that are left. Most of it got closed down by Dr. Beeching. But we have a steam line, which is over on the far side, and we have an electric railway. The electric railway is part of the national railway network in Britain. It runs this rolling stock, which I catch to work every day. It has some of the highest reliability figures for any line in Britain. That was built in 1938. It's well over 70 years old, but that's the rolling stock I travel on. It's not in very good condition, but it works. And people come to see that and that alone. If you're into railway simulators on the computer where you pretend to drive a train, that is one of the lines that's currently included in the railway simulator, running that rolling stock. We also have a steam line that links into it and allows people to travel on that. Again, this was put together by a bunch of amateurs, some schoolboys who decided they didn't want to lose all of the steam railways. They just said, that's it, we're not losing them, we're going to set up our own steam museum, and they did. No money, no funding, they just did it. And there is now a very vibrant tourist business running...
Go back.
Yeah, okay, sorry, go back.
Well, what's this?
This is a carriage under repair in their own workshop at Haven Street. It's about a mile from where I live. They employ apprentices from the local community to teach them craft engineering skills. So it's part of developing the community, it's part of providing employment for young people, and it's also part of providing the entertainment that the visitors to the railway see. They're not just seeing a finished product, they're seeing work underway. They're seeing people using paintbrushes, or machining things, or rebuilding things. Now that carriage, that particular one is about 1890 something. It's over 100 years old. It will be running on the railway soon. We have trackside buildings, they're all put together, and it's all done by a mixture of volunteers and paid staff. Another example, this one in Norfolk, the Bure Valley. It's a 15-inch gauge railway where they took over some old discarded National Railway standard gauge line and built a 15-inch gauge railway with brand new locomotives to provide a tourist attraction. Again, it's not full scale, but it means it's relatively cheap to run. The locomotives are all new, so they don't require any work. It's built on the track so that you can have a path down one side for cyclists and walkers, and the railway track on the other side. So it's multi-purpose, making use of an old route. They sell driver training experience days to people who've never driven a train before. They sell those for £800 for one day. And they are busy doing that. People will travel hundreds or thousands of miles to drive a steam locomotive. And they will pay for the privilege. Here's another one. This is Amberley, near in Sussex. It's not a preserved railway as such, but it is a place that has lots of transport. Old buses, garages, old things like old television sets or radios. People like me are enthusiastic about those as well. As my wife will tell you, my garage is full of old cars, old radio sets, all sorts of bits of old machinery. I'm not the only mad person in the world. They have railways around the museum, and it's all built into a quarry, an old quarry that was used for making mortar for building buildings.
Mine,
Mina, yeah. They have static exhibits. They have static exhibits outside, and again, they are not all finished and shiny. Some are old, but it's a place with lots of things going on. They have a collection of buses provided by the National Bus Company. They have an exhibition of domestic electricity and domestic electricity transmission equipment provided by EDF, Électricité de France, the nationalised French power company, providing an exhibition space in a museum in England. They are major players in the British power market, and they think it's worth their while letting people see how you distribute electricity as part of that business model. So they are sponsors of that operation with its industrial railways and so on. And people can visit this and see lots of things. This one in East Anglia, the East Anglian Railway Museum. There, you go in through a station booking office and onto a platform, and that is still used by the National Railway Service on this side. So that track there is normal running line for the normal passenger service, and you go over the bridge into the goods yard on the other side of the station, where they've built a whole museum of old pieces of railway rolling stock and locomotives. They've got very little track to drive any of the trains on. They can only go a few hundred metres, but that's fine, that's all they want. And they are open, and they are mending the railway lines, they're rebuilding them, working on them, rebuilding locomotives. And it's all part of the experience that the visitors have when they visit that particular museum. Now, I think it's really important to think about what Chris Scow has said, that rail museums and tour companies may continue to keep old steam trains on hand for demonstrations, posterity, or simple nostalgia. But for true rail fans, that's like seeing an animal in a zoo, a cage. It's not what rail fans call live steam. You know, live steam is something that many rail fans will travel thousands of miles to see. They'll go and see them in South Africa, they'll go and see them in China. And there are railway tour companies who specifically organise this kind of tour. And people pay large amounts of money to go on them, to ride on these tiny trains in the middle of nowhere. And within the next few years, none of these will be left. There will be nothing. Anywhere in the globe, all you'll be able to do is to go on organised trips to various places. Portugal could be one of those places. This is the website of one of the companies, PTG Tours. Now that is Portuguese Traction Group. It was another group of amateurs who set up a company to allow them to go and visit the railways of Portugal about 20 or 30 years ago. And they've turned that into a big business running heritage railway tours around the globe. People will travel long distances. This one in France, at Tournon, is a fabulous line, running 1 metre gauge engines such as this one. It's, to my mind, a little over-restored. It's too shiny, it's too perfect. It's very nice. They have not authentic railway rolling stock. That's all brand new German railway rolling stock. I don't like it, but it serves its purpose for that kind of thing. When we visited that, I did so with Bob and his wife and my wife, and we drove about 600 kilometres on a round trip to go for a ride on that train. Yes, we are mad. But what a fabulous train it was. And it was full. It was full of people enjoying the theatre of railways, enjoying the experience of railways, enjoying the ride up the line and then back down the line. It's a way of bringing people into an area, into a place where they wouldn't otherwise go. Now, I came back here after having been invited over to a conference by Eduardo. I knew nothing about here. But I came back with my family and we toured around the area in December. Not the best time of year, but fabulous place to be. And to see the area and to see Port Wine, to see the railways. So this is a place that people have come to over a long period of time. It's a unique place with a unique railway story. And that story can be continuing. In the area, we have all the infrastructure necessary to put together that kind of railway, preserved railway operation. The museums have got fabulous resources. They are absolutely, inordinately better than anything any British enthusiast ever had as a starting point. This stuff is fantastic. It's wonderful. It's in tremendous condition. It's well looked after. And there are sheds full of them. There are lots here. And it's the real material. It's the correct locomotives and the correct rolling stock in potentially the correct environment. And at the moment you have these carriages from Naples 1932 sitting out there just deteriorating, and they are in really good condition still. The locomotives sit there. There's this one down at Regua, which was overhauled in about 2001. Should be in reasonable operating condition, maybe. Even that one that sits on display, E1, should be good. The tracks around here are still there. In Tour itself, you've got an ideal location to run those trains. And let's say, what could be better than a location where you have fabulous people, fabulous food, wonderful scenery, wonderful railways, and port wine as well. Really, life does not get much better. Thank you.